Well, welcome everyone to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that is committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. Today, we're so delighted to have Laurie Carpenos. She has been counseling and coaching using her understanding of the three principles as her guide since 1986. She loves to listen to people, share how they see and experience life, and likes to show people who they truly are beneath their conditioned viewpoints and showing them what has been in the way of them maximizing their utmost potential. She works with individuals, couples, families, mental health practitioners, and coaches, as well as business associates, and offers courses and retreats. And we're so happy, Laurie, take it away.
Oh, thanks, Tom. It's great to see you. Great to see some names and faces that I recall, and so many new people, which was also wonderful to see. So, I decided I would talk about something that I am, you know, how we get on, we talk about what is at the top of our intrigue list. And this has been in the top of my intrigue list for a while, about telling the difference between wisdom and our personal conditioned thinking. Because to me, that has been at the forefront of every person, every group I've ever worked with. That's really, when I looked for quotes from all of Sid's books, and the one quote I really wanted to find, because I never get them exactly right, but the gist of it is that when people harmonize universal wisdom with their personal thinking, boy, that gets us through life so much easier. He didn't say that second part, but that's kind of like the trick to life, is really seeing how to pay attention, how to listen for wisdom, and not be so intrigued by the personal thinking that comes to us. So I want to tell you that I really want to open this up for conversation, because I learn as much from people investigating, looking deeper. I learn from people's stories. How does this show up in your life? So I'll just give you a little bit about how it, whatever comes to me about how it's shown up. I reflected on my life before knowing anything about the principles, about Sid Banks. That was not a name that I knew anything about. And even then, wisdom would sneak in. I didn't know what it was, but thankfully I paid attention. I'd like to think more often than not. I certainly did not pay attention all the time, that's for sure. I made some, messes that were not life-threatening, but not really good for me. So what popped into my mind was my brother. I have one sibling. He's 4 years younger than I am. We grew up in the same household until I left for college, and then he left for college, and neither of us, spent much time back at home after that. I did visit him when he was in college, but there was like this competition. We're only two siblings, and we have such a different view of life, which to me now, looking back, is still astounding that we had the same parents. So what made the difference? It was what we were paying attention to, right? He would gravitate to an uncle on my mother's side, and he, took in the view of my uncle. And I was more on Also, my mother's side, there weren't many relatives on my dad's side, but my aunt on my mother's side, and she was real different from her brother. And so we would have these email exchanges. And, back pre-principles, I knew enough that I was not in the right state of mind to send that email. I said, Lori, you're not happy right now. Go to sleep, have a good night's sleep. I'd come back the next morning and I was so grateful I never sent that email because it looked different to me. It didn't look like he was the worst person on the planet like it did the night before. And I had to let him know about that. So, there's this continuum of recognizing wisdom, whether you have words for it or not, whether you just feel it when you feel it before you learned anything about the fact that it's always our own thinking that's creating our experience. It's never what's going on out there, because if I'm not thinking about what's going on out there, I'm not experiencing it. So I just got a pop-up to confirm something. Oh, it's asking me to save Spanish, so I'll cancel that. Okay. You never know what's going to pop up on the screen, right? So, I'm thinking of this continuum. That's pretty obvious. Most people recognize that. But then you take it to the extreme where, and to this day, I can have my moments where I'm in self-righteousness and that feels good to me. So I'm thinking, okay, I learned that wisdom comes with a nice feeling. I'm feeling good, but self-righteousness is not the good feeling that Sid was talking about. Right? I mean, there's no better, higher way of thinking than anybody else. It's all thought created by humans, different humans thinking differently. But it still comes down to whatever we think is what we're going to experience. Whatever the other person thinks, that's what they're going to experience as truth. That's true just as true for them as our view is true for us. So I'm going to tell you a story that has stuck with me for years. It's not a personal story. It's a story that I heard from Dr. Bill. People refer to Bill Pettit, the psychiatrist in the Midwest, as Dr. Bill. And he told this story that he heard or read about a psychologist who went to, and some of you may have heard this story. So, maybe you'll just hear it anew or hear it a little deeper this time around. So the psychologist is asked to go into a jail to evaluate a young fellow who shot his principal in school. And the young fellow says to the psychologist, as I was walking down the hallway with the pistol in my hand, I was on a mission. I had to do what I had to do. I had to get this principal out of my life. He humiliated me, he embarrassed me, whatever happened. This young fellow said, I heard, it was like a voice saying, you don't have to do this. He said to the psychologist, they're sitting in the jail cell together, said to the psychologist, if only I knew to listen. If only I knew to listen to that, I would not be here today. Wow. I heard that story a very long time ago, but it is still as powerful to me as it was the first time I heard it. It's a real eye-opener. So, I know that my mission in my lifetime is not that it's a mission, because that would be like, a goal or doing something. But I just know that I'm so intrigued by this, that Sid saw this. And he said in many, many ways that every human has the ability to hear wisdom. That's where we come from. Before we are imbued with all the personal thinking, where we're given a name, we're given, pink clothes if we're girls and blue clothes if we're boys, although they're not doing that so much anymore. But, we're given a religion, we're given a way of thinking about life through our pastor or rabbi or priest or nun or I've heard from friends who went to Catholic school and they did everything they could to rebel against what they were learning. Still personal thinking. What we accept and what we reject is our ability to decide. We have free will. So let me just sit for a minute and see if there's anything else I want to say, because I really so much want to hear from personal stories from all of you. And then, I can talk some more. But is anything striking anybody that you'd like to share? Because I'll tell you something, and I just want to backtrack. I meant to thank Tom and the whole 3PGC board for doing these programs. I mean, and there's so many programs available to people. It's wonderful. All the work and support that goes into this to make this available for so many people. And, it's created a community. That's what I think is just so valuable about the 3PGC nonprofit, that we're a community that is continually growing. We're a community of people learning from one another. Nobody knows more than anybody else. Oh, I think I see a hand raised. No.
Yes, I just wanted to say from now forward in this call, if you have something you want to share, you can anytime raise your hand. And if you don't know, the way you find that is you go down to I believe, the reaction button, and you'll see a raised hand. And so feel free at any point.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, John. Yeah. So nice to have somebody at the wheel doing the steering, and I can be a passenger.
Yeah.
Passenger of life. We're all
And,
passengers.
as we're waiting for people to reflect and raise their hand a little bit, I love something that you said earlier. It was so simple, so direct, and I think sometimes we forget it. Even though we've been around this for a while, you said something like, well, if we're not thinking about it, we're not experiencing it. That alone is so powerful and so easy sometimes to overlook, even when we've been in this for a while.
When I think I first realized that, I think I could pin it to 9/11. Like, I thought I was dreaming. Like, am I alive? Am I awake? What I'm seeing on television? Did this just happen in New York, which is, less than 3 hours from me? That's insane. And that same day, I noticed that I was in a conversation with somebody. I was maybe even laughing at a joke. And I realized, oh, wait a minute. I have to come back to this horrible thing that I saw on television, 9/11. Holy cow, we've been attacked. But when it wasn't on my mind, that was like a wake-up call to me. Like, look at that. Even like arguments, like I work with couples a lot. Sometimes they'll come on their session with me and they'll be laughing. And they'll say to me, "You will not believe what we argued about last night." And they're kind of humbled and embarrassed to admit it. But that's part of the learning, right? When we all realize how much we shift and change. And that is one of the quotes that I saw of Sid's about the difference between wisdom and personal thinking. Personal thinking shifts and changes. Wisdom is always true. It's always true. Like if I'm working with a family and they want to set a good example and not be arguing in front of their children, well, that's wisdom. That's always true. I mean, can anybody think of a time when no, it's good to argue in front of kids, let them know that they can argue or whatever somebody can make up about it. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't express how you see things, but what a difference to know, hey, I know this is my own thinking right now, but this is how I'm seeing it. I want to know how you're seeing it. How do you think about this, whatever this is? Does that make sense? Who's got a good story that we can all learn from? And by the way, I think Tom mentioned this, right? That when you tell your story, you're not going to show up on the recording. They said it for privacy purposes that the recordings will unpinned. I always wanted to be pinned. That was the thing that was happening when boys would pin girls, but that was kind of before I came of age. Then it was boys would give girls their class rings. And my boyfriend in high school, his mother was beside herself that her son would give somebody else the class ring that she just paid good money for. Isn't it great? Like the things that used to really beat us up and trouble us, we can look back and laugh about it. I mean, it really, some things that look terrible look very humorous to me now, like that, for example. So, what else can I say? What else would you like me to say? That's another thing that you can do is ask questions if the story's not coming to you.
Yeah, and we have Christina. Christina, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, well, I have a question, which I'm guessing that I'm not the only person here with the same question, which is how on earth do you tell the difference between? Well, yeah, how do you know which is the right thing to listen to?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah, that's the bottom line, isn't it? Well, it comes with a feeling, right? When Sid would say, look for a good feeling, I would kind of make jokes about it. The beginning when I first heard that, like, where do you look for a good feeling under a rock? We feel what we're thinking. We can feel when we're in self-righteous, I know right, you don't know right, I'm the right one. We can feel when we're angry, you pushed my buttons, you triggered, blah, 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 blah. Why do you have to bring up something from the past? All of that, those bad feelings are not coming from wisdom. They're coming from our feeling, taking it personally. It's nothing personal about wisdom. Now, wisdom will help you make a choice. Should I study with this person or that person? I work with some college students. Should I go to this college or that college? And it's a good idea to stick with not knowing, be okay with not knowing if you have to make a choice between two things, and just ask for wisdom. And then go live your life, do your thing. You'll be amazed. It's hit me sometimes in the shower or driving down the street. Like when I'm running errands, parking the car, something will hit me. And I would call it an insight because I wasn't looking for an answer to that thing in that moment. But there it is. There's something that shows up that really hits me like, wow, that's truth. And it's not personal. It's not gonna add to my personal being other than gratitude. I guess we personally feel when we're grateful for an answer to something. So the best way to understand it is not through the words, not through my description, but through stories. You get a feeling, and then you'll notice in your own life. Like that's how I learned the most from Sid, not when I was necessarily sitting in front of him, but later something would happen in my life and I would say, oh my gosh, I think that's what Sid meant when he said, look for a nice feeling. For instance, let's say I was like crunching something about feeling bad about something somebody said to me, and all of a sudden I realized, well, that's just their thinking. It doesn't mean that that's true about me. I could ask them if they really think that bad thing about me. And boom, I'd be in a better state. And then I'd realize, oh man. Now, I didn't look for a good feeling when that happened. But I still think that's the direction. When Sid would say, look for a good feeling, now I see it as, well, that's the direction. I want the trajectory of my life to be in a good feeling as much as possible, because I have experienced, I know that I'm at my best. When I'm in a good feeling, I'm at my best. And when I'm, and so that's when I'm most likely to treat people the best, when I'm in a nice feeling. If I'm not in a good feeling, I'm more likely to argue or to feel like I have to defend myself. That's personal. Just earlier today, I had a session with a wife. I'm working with a couple, and sometimes we'll split up, and I was working with her. And, I just heard she was crunching, but then wisdom would come through. And I pointed her to that, and she lit up. She realized, wow, that she had been thinking she has to be on guard and defend herself whenever her husband throws a criticism. Now, she heard a criticism. What was he meaning when he said XYZ? Maybe he did mean to criticize her, but maybe he also was thinking, I love you and I want to help you. People have an interesting way of helping people when they don't need help. Is this making sense? Or am I giving you more things to question? I don't want to give you too much to think about. You just want to see what you know deep inside yourself beyond right and wrong. Oh, I see a hand up.
Yeah, Bevan, go ahead.
Hi, is it Bevan? Oh, you're muted, Bevan.
There we go. Forgot.
Did I say your name right?
Yeah, you did. One thing I learned about from hanging out with 3P is when I hear truth, I go silent. My thinking slows right down. And if I'm working with a client or listening to my wife, if I'm listening from that place, there's less chatter. It's a silent. That's the feeling for me. It's silence. It's just space. And it's amazing that the magic that happens when I'm coming from the listening, the silence, is the person's resilience shows up. If I'm coming from argument, I'll get into an argument for my wife. I'll hear her comment as a challenge. And and part of me wants sometimes to have an argument, but it's really not that satisfying. What's more satisfying is just coming from that silent place. And how I experience when I'm coming from personal thinking, I actually experience it coming from the left side of my brain. Doesn't mean that's where it comes from, but that's how I experience it. When I come from silence, it's coming from the right side. And again, it doesn't mean that's where it's actually coming from, but that's just how it shows up for me. And so it's a clue if I'm actually listening, there's this coming from the right side. If I'm arguing, if I'm trying to fix it, if I'm trying to solve the person's problem, the information's coming from the left. And that's a very strong clue to me where I'm coming from. So that might be useful to people.
Oh, thank you. That's interesting. Never heard it put that way before. I don't know if I could tell the difference, but maybe some people can.
It doesn't mean that is actually where it's coming from, but it does appear to be how it shows up for me. It's just a sense of truth is coming from this way, personal understanding is coming from this way. When I started to trust that feeling, I went, oh, shut up. I'm coming from the chattery part, the personal thinking. Just be quiet and sink into listening. And then magic happens. So, I mean, that's just how it shows up for me.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I loved what you said about when it feels like a challenge, like she's challenging me, right? That would be a clue, right? If you're feeling like somebody, and maybe they are, but that's in their innocence.
Right.
They're caught up in their personal thinking. But if you're feeling, oh, you're being challenged right now, to me, isn't it wonderful? It's a signal. That feeling of irritation is a signal.
And my wife is a genius.
Quiet. Go quiet. Yeah.
My wife is a genius at pointing out where my ego lives, where my personal thinking lives. She can just point to it. And I'll go, oh, I don't really want to. It takes two to have a challenge. It takes two to have an argument. And I can just disengage and hear it and get it. Or some days I want to have a fight. I want to have an argument. I want to stand up for myself. Fair enough. But then it gets to a point where I'm going, this really isn't that much fun. And then I'll invite her, both of us, to just back off. And usually we do. But it's taken about 40 years to get here. But thanks to Sid's understanding, it shifted really fast. Yeah.
You know, I'm going to reference something from Dr. Pettit again. He calls those things love letters. Like a pain in the neck or is really a love letter that we're thinking too much or thinking is off course. So if you feel challenged or you feel like I have to stand up for myself, that's like a love letter from the universe. It feels that irritation.
Mm.
Excuse me. That irritation feels like a signal to quiet down. And in the quieting, you'll be more available to hear what the other person has to say. You don't have to agree with it. But I've noticed when I'm irritated, like the one who can irritate me most is my brother. So that's like a tip of, I want to know what he wants to get across to me. I'm curious. I don't have to buy into it. I don't have to agree, but I want to know. Because it's interesting. It's interesting to hear another viewpoint. I see
We have
another
Enrique.
Enrique.
Thank you for holding a space for this. I am grateful that the conversation with Bevan, and he mentioned the thing that we have a choice if we want to get in an argument with our mate, or just say, you know what, I don't need to go there. That gives me freedom. I think of the missing link when it says that my thoughts and feelings are a mirror of my soul. And I think that's on page 6 or 7. And when I'm understanding that now is that if I'm feeling insecure and defensive in any situation, it's like I'm looking in a mirror and I see if I have something, I have a dirt on my face or my tie is off place or whatever. And I like the idea, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this. In the same missing link, Sydney Banks says that mental health and peace of mind are the result of finding and focusing on healthy thoughts moment to moment. And sometimes the question arises, okay, but which ones are healthy thoughts? Because in some people, when they talk, they say there are no good thoughts, no negative thoughts, no healthy thoughts. They're all neutral thoughts. But then the book says peace of mind and mental health comes from finding and focusing on healthy thoughts.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's a feeling, right? How do we distinguish healthy thoughts from unhealthy thoughts? I mean, there's the obvious ones, like I want to get a pistol and shoot my principal. That, that's would sound unhealthy to me, but to the person who did that, they didn't stop to think if it was a healthy or an unhealthy thought. They never stopped to think about that they have a choice. They don't have to go forward with everything they think. Yeah. And knowing that we have that, not only that we have choice, but we have the capacity to decipher between wisdom and personal thinking. And sometimes it's tougher than other times. Sometimes it's, like, the thing that helps me the most, that has helped me the most, is recognizing the feeling. It's a distinct feeling when I have this thought of standing up for myself or letting the person know they can't railroad me or And that feeling of irritation is letting me know to quiet my head, wait for wisdom to speak, quiet my mind. Nobody has the power to take anything from you. You don't have to stand up for yourself. We don't. We don't have to defend ourselves. We know where we're coming from.
Mm.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. When it's something big, like the example of getting a gun and going and shooting somebody, I can see it easy. But I was talking to a woman a couple of days ago, and she's probably 70, and she has an issue with her mother. Now, when I supported when she was younger and this and that. And then we were talking about the feeling and this and that. I go, yeah. But sometimes I hear her voice and the feeling, that anger or that resentment feels so good that I don't want to let it go. And I go, that's interesting. And the conversation goes on. And for me personally, sometimes it's nothing big, but it's somebody's voice or somebody's statement of condescending behavior that is like a little dust, on the desk. And nobody broke a mirror or nobody spilled, water, but it's just a tiny little bit of dust that creates that little discomfort. And sometimes I wish I could just clean it quickly, but it is there. Maybe I'm expecting or asking too much because I'm still human.
You're still human. That's right. Yeah, I love that. Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention that when you catch yourself, right, like in defense mode or in resentment mode, right? And I love too how the woman said to you, oh, but I like it when I feel resentment. I like it because that's that self-righteousness, pride, hubris, right? And we don't have to prove ourselves. There's nothing to prove. We're another wave in the ocean. They're a wave, we're a wave, we're all waves in the ocean of life. We're all part of the big picture, folks. You can't help that. So, yeah, that's when our personal thinking masquerades, tricks us. It's like sometimes our thinking will trick us into believing this feels good. Resentment, defending myself, standing up for my honor. Yeah. And when you realize that you just spend time in defense mode or resentment or whatever, you realize it. Learn from my past mistake. When I was first learning, when I was first exposed to the principles, I would really get down on myself if I'd get down. Boy, that helped, right? Then I heard somebody say, maybe it was Sid, maybe it was another student of Sid's, you can just be grateful that you saw it when you saw it, because you could have spent another 20 minutes, half a day in resentment. It's kind of arrogance, isn't it? When we go into those modes of standing up for ourselves, and there's no need for it. And it's a call to just get quiet and listen. Listen to the wisdom in the other person. Listen for the wisdom inside yourself. getting quiet in the, quieting down the monkey mind, as they say, quieting down all the personal thinking. Yeah. Did that help? Yeah, a little bit to decipher the two. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps. It gives a different perspective. And I'll see how it goes the next time I talk to the lady.
How do you mean it's a different perspective? How did that land for you as a different perspective?
It is like I can look at a situation from this standpoint that my ego or my personality says right now. And as I relax, I can move to the left or to the right, and then I can see a different picture. And by looking from a different picture, I observe something else. And I think if that is my intention on a session with somebody, just inviting them to see a life from a different person, just turn a little bit and see what you see. And then they'll see it because the wisdom is within them. So they'll see it.
Yeah. Yeah. The wisdom is in everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and so it's listening for wisdom. And, that ego really slips in as though it's got to keep us together. And that's not what keeps us together. The same thing that is keeping the planets to, rotating and doing what they do, keeping the galaxies together is beyond our personal being. It's that wisdom, that intelligence, the intelligence of everything. So, when you have a dilemma, let's say among your family members, and you've got to make a decision, like, do we move or do we stay put, or, how do we handle this situation? You'll know it when wisdom hits you, and everybody in the family will know it. It's not like it'll be good for one and bad for everybody else. The answer will be good for everyone. Even when they can't see it themselves, that it's good for them. Because they could be in their ego and full of pride. But then, given a little time, they look back and they realize, yeah, that was a good move. Yeah. So is this making sense? Have other questions popped up? I don't want to give the impression that it's a duel between ego and wisdom, good and bad. It's not a duel. It's wisdom is always at play. It's always there. It never leaves us. It just gets covered up with personal thinking, gets covered up by the ego. And we need ego. My goodness, if we didn't, we'd be crossing the street willy-nilly, not caring if we live or die by a truck that's coming down the road. I mean, we need ego to survive. But we overuse it. We use it to the point of being egotistical. Ego itself is not bad. It's when it's about us and it's not about the other person.
Laurie, I appreciate that comment about the ego, because yes, in many circles, the ego is seen as the enemy. And what I believe that ego is just like the breath, you know, I inhale and I exhale, and I always need it is right there. And I mean, I cannot exist without it. I could not be having this conversation without my ego to be here to hang out with you. But it seems like the ego in my mind is like us humans and the life force. We believe we are in charge of this world and we can fix it and we know how we want things and but there is another force taking care of things, but we kind of take credit and we complain a lot. And I think my ego does that. It's like, I'm in charge, I did this, like if I get a degree, I did all this and that. And at the end, there is a greater force doing the thing. The lifting is somebody else is doing the lifting. So.
And that's the balancing act.
Yes.
That, I believe, is what Sid meant when he said harmonizing our personal mind with universal mind.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have an intellect. It can do us in it. Sometimes it can really do a number on us if we let it run willy-nilly. But we need an intellect to manage ourselves on the planet. You know, we have to know what to buy to eat and how to make food. You know, that's all using the personal thinking, intellect. But harmonizing it, not overdoing it. I think that's what Sid meant about harmonizing the two. Like, don't get carried away with your personal thinking. Don't let it drown out the rest of the symphony. You know? Yeah. There's one quote. Oh, there's
We have
another
Amy.
Amy.
Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Hi,
Amy.
Amy.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. I love this exploration of the ego because the way I kind of conceptualize it is that the part that wants to get rid of the ego is actually your ego. So it's kind of like this rat race of this circular thinking. And I think, you know, when I first got involved with the principles, I think I conceptualized that wisdom always looked one way when in conflict with other people, that, you know, it would always look like me being compassionate or listening. But I've kind of found recently, wisdom can also mean setting boundaries, actually. And it actually can mean going no contact with someone, or in my case, you know, heading towards divorce. But there is a way that that's shown up, right? Like what you're talking about, Laura, like the flavor of that is different from taking actions like that out of spite or anger or hurt versus knowing this is right for me. This is the healthiest. You know, to go back to that, what Enrique was talking about as well. This is the healthiest choice, you know, and I think not overthinking it too of like what would be the three principle thing to do, right? Quote unquote. I think really opening up the space that wisdom can and does take on so many different flavors and actions, you know. I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you could still have compassion for the other person, but say, you know, we have to go our separate ways, and I wish you the best. And, you know, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that out. Yeah. Compassion doesn't mean going along with what society says we should do or what the other person says we should do. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with, go along with.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, you know, sometimes tactics in relationship, they do have an impact. You know, if someone has narcissistic tendencies and you're being gaslit and things are being projected, you know, there may reach a point, you know, and it's individualized where, again, it's that wisdom kind of shifts, but allowing that space, I think, has been really helpful, and I'm really grateful for coming across the principles. I think that it was almost like a preventative, like salve, or like a preventative mental health, you know, having come across this almost a decade ago, it really has helped, you know, navigate these life changes that you obviously don't expect. You know, you get married because you think you're going to spend, you know, your life with someone. So I think I've been grateful for the community for that, and for the teachings of Sid, for looking in the direction of grace and not righteousness. And I think sometimes too, like the different community members, like family members, maybe they don't have that level of understanding, right? And they're like, oh, take him for all he's, you know what I mean? Like all that kind of very egoic, very personal thinking. And it's just like very clear, I don't want anything to do with that. That doesn't serve in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, it's allowed a lot of grace and ease, and I think excitement, you know, surrendering to what is, and excited about the future. So that's all I got for now. So I'll let someone else take over the questions. But thank you, Lori, for hosting this. I really love this topic.
Oh, no, thank you. That was really good to hear. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I mean, I'm divorced, and it was the right thing for both of us. And my ex-husband is married to somebody who, I mean, from what I have seen, they're a good fit, you know, and I will be forever grateful, because I don't know if I would know anything about Sid Banks and the principles. It was my ex-husband who introduced me. How do you like that?
Mm.
You know, so we never know what another person is going to bring. You know, anybody I've dated since then, they have all brought me some gift, something that I would not have experienced, I would not have seen about life, you know, without any expectation of what the future holds. The future is not up to us. You could have the best intentions as you're, you know, like I did. I thought I'd be married for life. Of course, that's how we were raised. Not necessarily, and it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or he was a bad person. We did our best. We sure learned from each other. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's why, you know, people get together, to learn from each other. Who knows? So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
So Laurie, we just have a couple minutes left. Is there anything you want to say in closing before I tell people about what's coming next?
Yeah. One last question or comment. Yeah, I always, you know, I just love this so much. I don't like it when it has to end. But that's the beauty, is that there's always a community for you to jump into in 3PGC. So yeah. Well, I just want to thank you all for coming, because you're what makes it this beautiful community. You know, we're all learning from each other. Nobody's got it right. And the learning never ends, ever. Yeah, I know that for a fact. You know, it's like, seems like every day I'm seeing something I hadn't seen the day before. I mean, that might be an exaggeration, but that's how it feels. Yeah.
Well, great, Laurie. Thank you. This has been so delightful and enlightening. And I want to mention a couple of things. One of the things is the 3PGC has a newer website. So if you haven't seen that, 3pgc.org, and there are some newer options to be part of the community if you're not already. And I want to tell you about a couple of things coming up. Now, we have a few more webinars this month, one of which is going to be at a little different time because it's being organized by 3P Australia. And you know, they're on a completely different far away time zone from at least the United States. So on March 8th, which is just a few days from now, Christine Heath will be presenting, and that will be, I'm guessing the 7 p.m. is the 7 p.m. Australia time, but I'm not sure about that. So you might want to check your time zones or go to, oh, I'm sorry, that's 7 p.m. Eastern time on March 8th, which I think actually will be the following day in Australia. But regardless, that's coming up. And then also we have in a few weeks from now, 2 weeks from now on March 19th, we'll have Dickon Bettinger coming to speak with us and be with us. That'll be Tuesday, March 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern.